Okay, good morning, everyone. We are of the hour, and we have quorum, so welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals in the meeting may also be audibly and or visually recording this meeting. As well, a reminder, please, that all electronic devices are to be switched to non-audible function during committee meetings. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Yes, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, there is one typographical error in item 14.1, the closed session minutes for April 17th. The reasons listed below refer to subsection D as part of those reasons. That was just a typographical error that reference should be removed.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll reflect that when we receive at the end, or we'll just make sure it's noted?
The minutes themselves are correct. It's just the reference on the agenda, so it's already been taken care of in all the other records. Thank you.
Perfect. So may I have mover and second to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Clark. All in favor, electronic vote, please. Thank you, everyone. Now, is there anyone declaring a conflict of interest today on any of the items? Seeing none, thank you. And may I please have a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting of May the 1st? Moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Electronic vote, please. Thank you. And we're going to go right into discussion items. I'm going to turn to Mayor. Sorry, my apologies. Councillor. Sorry, okay, I have a speakers list now then. Well, I'm going to turn to, is this on item 10.1? We're all on here? Okay, so Mayor Fred Eisenberger, you wanted to, I've got you up first, sir.
10.1?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask that Chris Jacobson do a verbal report on the report. I know that some have asked for a broader report. I'm not sure what the intent for that is, but I think Chris is here. He's going to overview the report. I think the elements in the report identify where we're at in terms of the entire LRT process, and of course here for any comments or questions. So if I could maybe make the request that he do a formal overview of the report, and then we can go from there.
So I think, Mr. Mayor, that Stephanie has confirmed that, Chris, you will do just a bit of a presentation from your seat, because he really doesn't have an overview presentation. It wasn't intended for that. So if that's okay, we'll allow that to go ahead. Councillor Ferguson?
Do you want me to ask questions now, or is Chris going to do it?
Well, everybody's coming up before we...
Well, my question was, and I can ask it, and maybe Chris can cover it when he gives his verbal report, is that Council passed a resolution a few months ago asking for an update, which is what we're getting today, but particularly around what's the budget now? Because that seems to be what has the community on pins and needles. The province is committed to $1 billion. Is the project still going to be under $1 billion from the latest estimates with all the escalation issues and scope creep that may or may not be happening and property acquisition? So can we just get an update on the budget and what Metrolink's latest numbers is?
Okay, so we'll leave that with Chris to provide when he gives his overview. Thank you. Councillor Partridge?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I had two things now. First of all, I was going to say I need to leave by 1 o'clock to take my father to a doctor's appointment. But Councillor Jackson had sent around an email earlier requesting that, perhaps we could have a more fulsome presentation in light of the fact that we have new councillors this term, plus a lot has happened since Councillor Clark was on previously. And I tend to agree with him. I think we would be prudent and good to have a more fulsome presentation, and also to have Metrolinx included in that. So that email went out, I believe it was early this morning, and I've certainly am on side with that because, again, we have some new folks around the table, and a lot of things have happened. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure we'll be dealing with that. Councillor Collins?
I can wait till after the presentation.
Thank you. I'll ask you to go back on after. Yeah. Councillor Whitehead? Is everybody prepared to wait till after the presentation then, or, okay, Councillor Farr's not, so Councillor Farr?
My quick question is, do we still have the LRT subcommittee? Is that still in existence through you to the clerk?
We can ask Chris to answer that as well. How would
Chris.
that be? Okay, so I'm going to clear everyone off then. We'll turn to...
Hi, through the chair. Good morning, everybody. So what I'll do right now is just provide you with a quick overview of the report, the information contained within, and it's really just an update on the project, where we're at these days. The last time we were at council was on May 31st, 2018, about a year ago today, where we updated council on the project schedule. More than anything, advised council that we had entered the in-market phase with the release of the request for proposals, and that was on Friday, April 13th of 2018. It did speak to some alignment changes that we were considering. Also spoke to our community engagement strategies with the Community Connector program, and talked a little bit about property acquisition. So after council received that report, we went through the provincial election, and as a result of that, there was a moratorium placed on the purchasing of property. That occurred, I believe, towards the end of June of 2018, which essentially put a freeze on property purchases within the corridor. At that time, with that happening, the bidders, the 3 bid teams that we have bidding on this project, slowed their progress on developing their bids. There was some uncertainty around exactly how the project was going to proceed with the provincial government's freeze on the property, and as well there was the municipal election that was in there as well. So it's safe to say that the bidders, seeing that uncertainty, did slow their progress. So on March 28th of this year, Mayor Eisenberger and the Honourable Jeff Urick, Minister of Transportation, met to discuss the project. Through that meeting, it was determined that the property freeze would be lifted by the province, that the original funding commitment was still in place, and that the project was back on. So what does that mean to the overall project schedule? Initially, we expected to have about a 12-month in-market period, meaning that the RFPs or the bid team would have about 12 months to prepare their bid submission or their proposal to the RFP. We expected those proposals to be submitted to us probably towards the end of April of 2019, sometime in May of 2019. There would then be an evaluation period, and we would have a preferred bid team selected sometime this fall of 2019. With the freeze in the provincial property purchasing, that got delayed. So as it is right now, we're about 12 months off that original schedule. So the bidders are re-engaged at this point in time. They are actively working on their bid submissions and proposals. All of the bid teams are engaged. No bid team has dropped out. We expect the bids to now come in, the proposals to now be received sometime about a year from now, May of 2020. Again, with an evaluation of a couple of months, we should know what the preferred proponent is by the fall of 2020. And if you back that out and just look at it from a construction perspective, the first year of major construction, if that schedule holds true, would most likely be 2021. However, there will be some early works projects that will happen along the corridor, even starting as early as this year in 2019 and through 2020. Those early works projects are related to potential utility relocations. There's also some water main work that we're doing at the intersection of King and Sherman, King and Wentworth, and I believe King and Ottawa as well, just to get set up and ready to go. All early works projects are fully funded through the project. There is no city money needed for those works. They're just part of the overall capital costs. In terms of the spending to date on the project, Metrolinx has spent or committed a total of $171 million so far. So that's 151 of that has been spent. Another 20 million has been committed. And those costs date back to 2007 to the original EA. And that includes all costs associated with the project to do the original EA, the update EA in 2017 for purchasing properties, as well as all other utility, exploration works, preparatory works that we're doing along the corridor. So to date, we've spent approximately $75 million on property acquisitions. So with respect to property acquisitions, as we've outlined in the past, there's 90 full properties that are required for the project, and an additional 300 smaller partial purchases. Now, those partial purchases could range from a few feet to a few meters. Largely, they're just land, usually grass that's required, and those are ongoing. So to date, we have purchased 58 full properties so far. We are still proceeding on a willing seller, willing buyer basis. We have not started the expropriation process for any properties yet. However, we do expect that at some point in time we will need to start the expropriation process, and that could be as early as the end of the year. So in terms of the properties that we have purchased, the full properties that we have purchased, there are a number of buildings and structures that do need to demolish in order to make way for future construction. So we expect those demolitions to start probably this summer. We don't have a firm schedule just yet or a priority schedule just yet from Metrolinx, but they have indicated that they would be looking to start the demolition process sometime this summer. And most likely that demolition process would take the better part of 12 months to complete with the number of properties that are affected. We would follow our typical demolition process where we would make sure that all councillors, the ward councillors, were updated as to what properties were coming down, when they were coming down, what the mitigation strategies would be put in place for those demolitions. Now, the other side of the demolition process is tenant support. And there are a number of properties, I believe 15 in total so far, that we've acquired that do have existing residential tenants. So in order to assist those tenants find new housing, we do have a tenant support strategy, and I believe Appendix A of that report speaks to the tenant support strategy and the strategies that we put in place to assist those residents find new lodging. And it's somewhat unique on this project and for Metrolinx. Metrolinx typically doesn't get involved in these types of relocation strategies, but on this corridor it is necessary. So we have a Made in Hamilton approach, which is led through our tenant support people, and David Derbyshire, who's in the crowd today. I know many of you know David, who leads our Community Connector program, and is also responsible in leading our tenant support strategy. So we offer one-on-one counseling and support to all tenants along the corridor, trying to find them appropriate accommodations. Now, from a design perspective, this project is somewhat different than other projects where, a conventional project, we would have the design solidified, we would then submit it for tender with a schedule of quantities, and everything would be known. Through the design, build, finance, operate, and maintain process, it's slightly different, where the proponents themselves, the bidders themselves, are coming up with the final design. We are providing them with guidance, with performance expectations around what it is we want it to look like, how we want it to perform, and ultimately they are responsible for creating the final design, of course, with our input and ultimately our approval. So there are a few things that we're giving some consideration to at this point in time from an alignment perspective. One is at the intersection of Queen and Main. Currently, or the original proposal had an eastbound lane at that location, extending from Dundurn to Queen Street. Last year in our update to council, we had identified that the connection from Dundurn to Margaret Street was going to be eliminated in order to accommodate the guideway, and we went side running at that point, which really made travel on the eastbound lane of King Street more localized in nature. It was really just going to facilitate the neighborhood. There are some challenges associated with the intersection of Queen and King. There were some impacts to the Scottish Rite Club as well in terms of their heritage fencing. So we've re-looked at that intersection and have determined that from a traffic perspective, we don't need the eastbound lane at that location anymore, since it's only localized traffic that are using that road. Which will allow us to create a better platform, a better station area for the users, as well as minimize the impact to the Scottish Rite Club. The other thing it allows, it creates a nice advantage for us, is council recommended a two-way traffic conversion of Queen Street between Main and King earlier this year. So by eliminating that eastbound lane, it actually allows us to free up some signal timing and actually allow the intersection to operate much better with the future two-way traffic on that section of road. The second alignment change is down by, or between Gage Avenue and Melrose Avenue in front of Bernie Custis School and Bernie Morelli Recreation Center. The original design or concept had the LRT running down the center of the road with a station stop in the middle of the road at that location. The transition of the guideway or the LRT guideway through the intersection of Gage was complicated. I don't think anybody was really overly thrilled with the original design that we had at that location. So we've worked on coming up with an alternate design, which pushes the LRT guideway to the north side of the road, and that allows us to actually create a station stop right in front of the recreation center and right in front of the new high school, so that students accessing the LRT don't have to cross one lane of traffic in order to stand on the center platform. They can actually congregate in front of the school. That will also help Tim Hortons Field during large events because we'll have a greater queuing area. It just results in an overall better, safer environment for the users of the LRT and actually makes traffic operations a lot easier as well. So those are really the two major alignment shifts that we're talking about at this point in time and suggesting to the proponents. The other alignment adjustments that we're giving consideration to at this point in time is the elimination of the eastbound and westbound left turn lanes at select locations, primarily between, say, the Queenston Traffic Circle and Wellington Street. So that would affect the intersection at Kenilworth, the intersection at Ottawa, Sherman, and Wentworth. Those would be the three locations that would be affected by that. So we've done some preliminary testing on the elimination of those left turn lanes, and actually, it actually performs quite well. Definitely performs well from an LRT perspective. I think we can all appreciate that traffic flow through that corridor was going to be constrained regardless of the environment that we provided in the future. But by eliminating the left turn lanes, not eliminating the left turn move, just eliminating the left turn lane, we would actually accommodate the left turn move through special phasing, traffic signal phasing. It allows us to create a better pedestrian environment at those locations. So we are space constrained in that corridor. The addition of the left turn lanes, the addition of wider curb returns, corner radii for trucks just really created an environment that wasn't conducive to what we were trying to achieve. And our philosophy through this corridor has always been people first. So by eliminating the left turn lanes and by rejigging some of the geometry of those intersections, we can actually create better people places in and around these station stops, which is what we want to do. We might actually be able to get some greenery back into the corridor, maybe some trees, some landscaping, definitely have better integration with our conventional transit system as well as our Shobi bike shares. So it just affords us greater opportunities to do things in those areas that are not so car dominated. So lastly, I'll talk a little bit about community engagement. So we are about to embark on our 7th canvas of the Community Connector program. That's going to start, I believe it's June 3rd, where we're going to have our community connectors go out and knock on every single door within the corridor. It's been very successful. It's a Made in Hamilton strategy, very well received by the public, by the business owners, the residents, the tenants up and along the corridor. I think we visit close to 1,400 properties along the corridor every single year. We do it twice a year, so we'll be looking to do it again in the fall. And we're out there just to field questions, answer questions, get feedback from the public, and that information is used by the project team to try to inform the project. So I can't say enough about the work that the community connectors do. It is a very successful program. Again, David Derbyshire, sitting behind me, leads that and just does a wonderful job. So over the next 12 months, really city staff will be supporting Metrolinx during the in-market period. And it's, I have to stress that we are in market right now. So there is an active bid process that's taking place. The proponents are working on their bid submissions at this point in time. And that's going to take about 12 months or so. So we'll be engaged with the proponents through their request for information process. We'll be having design meetings with them, commercially confidential meetings with them as well to talk about how they would do certain things from a technical perspective. And we expect that that will wrap up in 12 months or about this time next year. And once that closes and we've done the evaluation, then we'll have the firm numbers. We'll know exactly what the capital costs of construction will be, and we'll also know what the operations and maintenance costs will be for the next 30 years. And then once we have that information, we'll be coming back to council with that information, along with our recommendations for the future master agreement that will help guide this project and our relationship with Metrolinx for the next 30 years, as well as the O&M agreement that's part of that. So I will. That's kind of the end of the presentation, end of what's in the report. I will address Councillor Ferguson's question around the budget and cost overruns. So there was a motion put forward by Councillor Clark a few months ago concerning cost overruns and how Metrolinx would, or the province would deal with cost overruns. We have not heard back from them just yet. We'll continue to ask them for their thoughts around how would they handle such a situation. But we are waiting for that. In terms of the actual budget, when the Minister of Transportation visited with the mayor back in March, there was a full commitment to the original funding amount, which was the $1 billion. So there's been no other discussion around the funding beyond that. The original funding commitment was still in play. So with that, I'll wrap it up and I'll hand it back to the chair.
Thank you for that, Chris. So I have a speakers list. I'll start. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chris, for the presentation. You're indicating they're already in the process and they've already received the procurement documents. When did they receive them? Because that's not my understanding, so I just want to get clarity.
Through the chair, technically, all the proponents received the bid documents on Friday, April 13th, 2018, so a year ago.
Yeah, now, my understanding, though, things have changed dramatically. Has there been any changes to those, or amendments to those procurement documents in that year?
So through the chair, I wouldn't say that things have changed dramatically when it comes to the tender documents. These tender documents, they always get updated from time to time as new information comes through, and we get requests for information from the proponents. So amendments do occur from time to time, but I wouldn't say on this project that there's been a radical shift in the way that the project is being delivered.
So one of the examples is the tender was supposed to be done this March. So clearly things haven't gone according to COI. So there's been significant material changes in the timelines. We're now talking probably next spring. Is that correct, through the chair?
So through the chair, that's correct. We're talking next spring for bid submission, correct?
Can you confirm that my understanding there was 3 consortiums originally that were bidding, and now my understanding we're down to 2. Is that correct?
So through the chair, that's not correct. All 3 bid teams are still engaged.
My understanding one of them has gone bankrupt, and you're not aware of that?
Through the chair, Metrolinx has not advised us that any of the bid teams have dropped out. In fact, the last update we received from Metrolinx said that all 3 bid teams were in fact engaged.
And when was that update, through the chair?
Through the chair, that would have been a matter of weeks ago.
Okay, you might want to check again. The next question I have is, in the consultations, we know that 30,000 vehicles are being diverted, especially through the construction period, and we know that the capacity of vehicle traffic on King Street is going to be significantly limited as a result of the LRT. when you're out there consulting, and, you know, I've heard from very, very close friends that live in Ward 3, their concern is the drive-through traffic. Are you guaranteeing that they're not going to see significant impacts in their neighborhoods?
So through the chair, when it comes to traffic management, and especially traffic management in construction zones, there are no guarantees. That would be impossible to do. With that said, we will be having significant work and plans developed around construction management and mitigation. And if we identify that there are neighborhoods that are being impacted by potential cut-through traffic, trying to avoid a construction zone, then we'll definitely be working with Metrolinx and the Progeco company at that time to mitigate those impacts. So there is language in the contract that speaks to that, that if those situations do arise, that it is, well, it's incumbent on everybody to ensure that we do our best to mitigate those impacts. The one thing I will speak to is travel demand management and what we're doing, which is different on this project than other projects, is we as a city are taking on the role of the managers of the travel demand management plan for this project. We don't want to leave that up to the company to do. Other projects have done that and they haven't had great results. We know our community best. We have experts that are embedded in our transportation planning group through their Smart Commute program who know how to do this. So we'll be developing a travel demand management plan for this project over the next 12 to 18 months. And the goal of that plan is really to educate everyone on construction mitigation, travel route options, when to travel, when not to travel, do you need to travel, all of those things, getting out to the major employers, getting out to residents, getting out to anybody and everybody along the corridor so that they're well informed and that they can make informed decisions when it comes to travel during construction.
So you're talking construction. I was also talking about in operation, we're looking at probably about 20,000 plus being diverted off of King Street. So, and I know that staff have been doing great work on Yeoman's Job and trying to, it's not about capacity necessarily, especially at peak hours. It's more about, I guess, way signs and lighting systems and so forth. But we know that vehicle traffic is like water, it takes a path of least resistance. So I'm trying to understand, what are you saying to the community relative to post-construction phase with 20,000 cars? What kind of assurances that we can provide that we're not going to drive, or there won't be much more higher traffic, again, going through those neighborhoods?
So through the chair, this project is not unlike any other construction project that we do, or in any instance where we potentially reduce capacity on a road. It's difficult for us to say exactly what will happen. The key for us is that we continue to monitor the situation to ensure that we don't see those types of impacts up into those neighborhoods. And if those impacts do happen, then we need to make an adjustment. So the traffic system is dynamic. It changes daily. People's travel habits change all the time. So what we see one day may not necessarily happen the next day, and trying to project that out 8 years into the future is difficult. The best commitment that we can make at this point in time is that we will monitor it, and if we see that we are having an impact on local neighborhoods, then we'll have to address it for sure.
So it's fluid. The responses will be fluid depending on the circumstances. So that's. I mean, what else can you do? I appreciate that. The procurement documents. Are those public documents? Is there any? And I'm not talking about the consortium's application. I'm talking about the actual procurement document, because it's also my understanding there is a budget, a range on the budget that's contained within those procurement documents. So if I want to access, as a counselor, the procurement documents, I'm talking about the template, I'm talking about all the information, I'm not talking about consortium responding to it, I'm just talking about the actual raw documents. Is that available to the general public?
Through the chair, at this point in time, because we are in market, no, those documents are not available to the public. They're considered commercially confidential at this point.
Help me understand, when you say commercial, we're talking about documents that do not reveal any of the consortium's corporate financial issues. So it's really a document laying out the cost and the delivery and the operating and maintenance of a service. So help me understand what is what part are they trying to protect on a blank template that goes out to consortiums?
So through the chair, I think that's a question that we would have to ask Metrolinx. Ultimately, it's their process. They're the ones who identify what is commercially sensitive and what is not commercially sensitive. But we can get that information for you and get it back to you.
I appreciate it. Now, if there's all kinds of talk. I mean, the province has committed 870 million, or the differential between what's been spent to date and the original $1 billion commitment. Is that correct? Through the chair.
Through the chair, their original funding commitment of $1 billion towards the capital construction cost of the processes or the project is in place.
I think the transportation minister indicated that the balance is the commitment, so it's around 870 million. Is that correct?
If the number is truly, in fact, the billion, then the math would suggest it would be in that range. However, what I would comment on is that typically on these projects, because that $1 billion was in 2014 dollars, that there is an escalation associated with the budget. So being 2019, you would have 5 years of escalation on that funding. So that could put us, again, depending upon what the escalation factor would be, could put us at 1.1 to 1.2 billion total.
Okay, but we're talking. And those escalation clauses were built into the procurement document, or was articulated? Because I don't remember the minister, when I talked to him directly, indicating that these numbers were escalated. So I'm wondering where that's coming from.
So through the chair, all of the discussions that we've had with Metrolinx in the past and actually in council, have included an escalation on that funding.
So we have documentation that's enshrined the government's financial commitment that it would be done and committed to an escalated dollars.
We would have to go back and look through all of the documentation to see where it says that specifically. However, the indication from the province and from Metrolinx has been that it is an escalated budget amount.
Fair enough. If there's a shortfall, I mean, my understanding, we can get into the design of the bridge, where my understanding you had to make alterations to accommodate emergency vehicles on the original design. Is that correct?
So through the chair, I'm assuming you're referencing the flyover bridge on the 403?
Correct.
So on that structure, the only design change we made was to ensure that it was drivable for emergency services.
Correct.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that was a significant design change. We just wanted to ensure that our emergency service providers had the opportunity to access that structure should something go wrong.
And is there additional cost to that?
So through the chair, that's difficult to say on an individual level. Each bidder will look at the individual components of this bid process in their own way. One might bid it differently than the other, so it's very difficult to say whether or not that actually increases the cost of that specific item.
Now, my understanding is that there are some issues in regards to the, I don't know if it's called the pipelining, or the issues in regards to the stabilization of the bridge and how that would be done from an engineering point of view, and there might be some issues based on the lands that you would be building these pylons on, the pillars, or whatever you want to call it, the supports.
So through the chair, I haven't heard any of those technical details. We've been following all of the technical details and engineering of this project quite closely. That has never been raised to my knowledge.
Appreciate it. I believe that it's very close to water courses, and so there are clear issues in respect to how solid the ground is and what you might have to do to accommodate. And we know when you do pylon, it's a lot more expensive than a traditional structure. So the other question I have is, if there's a shortfall, there's been talk about other private sector dollars coming in. So I talked to Mike Zagaric. So let's start with, if there's a shortfall, say, of $300 million, and the city was to entertain the cover that differential and debt finance it, what are the constraints in doing that? What is the difficulty?
So through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, the city can only issue debt as it relates to city assets. If the scenario was such that the city was a willing contributor to the project, if there were some financial constraints, we would have to enter into discussions as it relates to the partnership of the project, in that the city would have to own some portion of the assets as it relates to any debt financing. So again, if the city was a contributor and we were to fund it through debt, the city would have to hold ownership of those assets.
So that would be a material change in respect to the procurement process. So I just want to highlight that would be one of the constraints. Now, if in the current procurement documents, again, if there's a shortfall, there's been talk about other private sector, pension funds, whatever, offsetting that differential, but of course they have to justify it through a return, through obviously the Pension Act. So help me understand, they would need either, again, the same issue, either ownership or ability to demonstrate a return on those investments. Is that correct, through the chair?
For you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I think it would be in the hands of Metrolinx as it relates to the form of the partnership. If Metrolinx was looking to broaden the financial capacity by broadening the partnership, they would have to look at the framework as it relates to the consortium makeup and how within their framework they could do so. So again, I would assume, similar to the previous scenario, is if you're inviting others to the party, those individuals would expect some form of financial benefit as it relates to the long term of the project. And again, that would be subject to the framework or the model that Metrolinx has as it relates to the consortium. And again, it would be subject to their model.
So that would have to be built into, so what does that do to the procurement process if in fact that is the case? Because it would change the business plan, would it not?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I'm not familiar with Metrolinx's procurement policies or processes. If it were a city project, it would we would have to review whether or not we have the legal capacity to amend the terms of reference and the proposed process or project midstream. That would probably require some addendum and some reconsideration at council. But again, that's our process as it relates to Metrolinx as to how they could affect the composition of the consortium if required. That would be a question we would have to pose to Metrolinx.
Okay, and one of the things that we talked about from day one, if the dollars aren't there, they can always scope the project. Is that still the reality, through the chair?
So through the chair, yes. So if there were to be an overage on the capital costs, there would be a number of mechanisms that they would look through. Descoping is one of those options. The question really becomes, what are we talking? Are we talking 1 million over, 10 million over, 100 million over? It really is dependent upon the magnitude of what a potential overage would be as to what strategy would be best to handle that overage. So it's difficult to speculate on how best to handle the overage when we're not exactly sure exactly what the overage would be or if one would even exist.
So if, in fact, there was an overage of over $100 million, and you would have to descope it, and that might mean that you don't bring it out to Eastgate, for example, you go back to Queenston Circle or whatever is financially feasible, depending on the circumstances at the time. Would that now mean a new procurement document would have to be put out, since what's being bid on is to Eastgate and a business case by the consortium is being built based on Eastgate?
So through the chair, I think we need to deal with that at that time as to what that would mean to the overall procurement or the bidders. It's too difficult to speculate on exactly what that would be or how that would impact their process.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Councillor Whitehead asked a number of mine, so I'm just going to go to the ones that have been left. And that's, what is our legal obligation with the province if it's over and they've spent the resources that have been quoted to date? And so in the scenario, I'm a little concerned that Councillor Clark's request for information hasn't yet come our way. So let me go there first. Do we know why that's the case? Is it that they just don't have the information, or is it that they have it and don't want to share it?
So through the chair, I don't really want to speak on behalf of Metrolinx and why they haven't responded to that yet. However, maybe I will, and just say that I know that it's a sensitive matter for them, and I know that they want to make sure that they understand exactly what potential options would be. As noted through the discussion with Councillor Whitehead, there's a lot of speculation around, what a potential overage would be, what the magnitude of that overage would be, and how you would handle each individual overage. So, I don't think it's quite as simple as saying, well, for all overages, this is the process that you would use. I think it's nuanced, and I'm assuming that they are looking at those avenues. But as noted earlier, we'll definitely follow up with Metrolinx and make sure that they get back to us as soon as possible with their thoughts.
Thank you. Second, then, would be when the minister was here, was there discussion or talk of if it goes over what the city's obligations are in that regard? Whether it's the $10 million, $100 million, as you referenced.
Well, I was at the meeting, and so we had a direct conversation about that. I think the minister confirmed both publicly and privately that we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, and that there are other options actually spelled out in the agreement itself, our memorandum of understanding, which actually alludes to them potentially going to the federal government for any additional, if that is required. At no time indicated that any of that responsibility was on the backs of the city of Hamilton, and it's pursuant to the original agreement, and nothing has changed.
Okay, I think that clears it up. So I guess my only concern with that is that all of our eggs from the federal government right now are supporting our transit plan. Is that correct? Through you to staff. Question is, the federal resources that have been made available for transit right now have all been allocated towards our 10-year transit plan. So if the dominoes change in that regard, the 10-year transit plan would be affected.
So through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, that's correct. I believe we are assuming about $387 million in federal and provincial funding through public PTIF2, the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, and a majority of those funds would go towards our maintenance and storage facility, as well as some additional rolling stock in order to expand on the conventional transit program, our BLAST program.
And currently, is this project eligible under the plan if, in fact, we had made this request a year or 2 years ago to the feds, or is it ineligible? Further criteria?
So through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, we'd have to go back to the eligibility of the program. Again, similar to our previous discussion around the city's ability to finance projects. Again, given the fact that this is a provincial program, if the city were to apply to the federal government in an effort to leverage federal funding on the city's behalf towards a provincial asset, we would have to review the program eligibility criteria.
Okay. So just back then to the memorandum of understanding, we've given the province then the ability to go off and ask for those extra resources if that is required. We still don't know, as I think Chris has emphasized. It's still an open question. So just to be clear though, whether it's $1, $1 million, $10 million, the day that the envelope's open, the province then has the discretion to go off and ask the feds to make up for whatever shortfall should one exist.
So through the chair, that would be correct.
Okay. Yep, I think that's all my questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. First of all, thank you so much for this update. Folks in Ward 3 have been very eager to hear more about where the project is at, and so I feel like I can finally give an update. So thank you for that. And for all the door knocking work that's happened and the resident engagement work. I know that residents in Ward 3 have been, for the most part, very encouraged by that level of outreach by the city, especially to those who are particularly adjacent to the corridor. I have a couple of questions, one pertaining to the procurement process and what specifically, if the LRT project is slated to integrate an apprenticeship and training program for local employment opportunities, and whether or not that's embedded in the procurement process or where that might be. Through the chair to staff.
So through the chair, that's correct. So there is a community benefits component to the procurement, of which we are working with the Hamilton Community Benefits Network to establish exactly what that looks like. So local apprenticeships, trade development. There's also trade shows, buying local, supplying local. All of those elements are embedded in the procurement documents, and it is up to the individual proponents to outline what the proposal would be to community benefits, working through the Hamilton Community Benefits Network.
Excellent. So through the chair, I guess the question would be, our council has a community benefits subcommittee. Both Councillor Farr and I are appointed to that committee, and we have yet to meet and convene. So I'm just curious about the process, given that this work is now underway. There's work that's related to the LRT. There's work around community benefits around other projects, when that committee might be meeting.
Madam Deputy Mayor, you said the Community Benefits Subcommittee? I would have to double check that for you. I can check right now.
All right, thank you. That's it for now, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, Metrolinx is noticeably absent today. I think it's important that they be here to help answer our questions and not put it on you. And I think, well, first of all, has our rep changed?
So through the chair, no. Our rep is still Andrew Hope. Andrew is still the director, actually vice president now of the Hamilton LRT project. So Andrew is still on the project.
Is there any reason why he's not here today?
Through the chair, that's my fault. He asked me whether or not he should be here today, and given that it was an update report to council, I said I didn't think it was necessary, so I'll take responsibility for that.
Okay, I would suggest to you in the future, probably it's a good idea to have Andrew here, because they're the funders of the project, and that's a big issue for us. And you made the comment, Chris, in answering one of my colleagues' questions about, I think it was Councillor Collins, the potential of cost overruns, and you said that Metrolinx sees that as a sensitive matter. I'm going to suggest to you it's a sensitive matter around this council table and in our citizens also. And what's worrying me is, we may be, maybe it's just my typical view of things sometimes, we're being set up. And by being set up, they're not disclosing it to us. Construction 101, capital budgets 101 is you put a budget together. And a budget was put together originally. It was about $850 million, as I remember. And then the province come on side and agreed to fund $1 billion. The new premier has been brutally clear. If it's over $1 billion, we're capped out at $1 billion. We talked about the relationship maybe going to the federal government money, which is a great idea. Well, my observations, and I think staff's observations, is the province and Ottawa is not getting along very well. And you know, there is an infrastructure program that the federal government has approved, tons of money sitting there, but the province won't sign the agreement. And so that signals to me that they're not getting along. My fear, Chris, is that you're going to continue spending a ton of money, buying property, all the consultants on the RFP, you know, and then you're going to have the cost of the proponents putting their bid together. And you're telling us now we won't know the number till we slit the envelope a year from now. I'm going to suggest to you that the cost may be up radically by then, you know, from what we've actually spent today. I think you said we're in the $150 million range. We'll be significantly higher than that a year from now. And if we get a sticker shock, once they slit the envelope a year from now, and then they're going to turn to us and say, okay, at that time, okay, you make it up. That's our fear. That's the community's fear. That's my fear. And to simply say, no, you're going to wait till you slit the envelope is not good enough. We need to know now, using there must be a spreadsheet put together where certain assumptions were made when this bid was put together. What's changed? Plug those changes in, and what's the 850 gone to now? And then we can ask the question, okay, if it's under billion, everything's great, but if it's 1.4 billion, going to have a problem. Particularly if they then turn to us at the 11th hour and say, okay, city, if you want this thing to go, make it up. And it's going to become a very difficult decision for us at that time because of the money that's spent. So I want an answer, and that's why I supported the resolution to ask Metrolinx, what's your current budget? And the answer we're getting, wait till a year. Not good enough. You know, because there's too many things that can go south on us, and then we can get caught a year from now. And are we being set up for that? I'm not sure. And you know, you're always going to assume the worst when you don't have the answers. That's just human nature. And so it'll be very helpful to us if we took this sensitive matter and faced it head on so that we know for sure what we're facing down the road. Okay, I think that's all I have to say at this time. I'm disappointed we're not back today saying, here's our new budget based on the same assumptions that were used before. Thank you.
Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my first question through you to Chris would be on the project schedule. Reading the report, initially the completion was scheduled for substantially complete in 2024, and we're still expecting substantial completion in 2024 despite the year delay with the bidding process. Is that correct?
So through the chair, we're going to endeavor to the best of our ability to achieve the 2024 date. The 2024 date was based on a 5-year construction schedule that was put together by our technical experts. You know, back when the original RFP was released. The actual construction schedule will be based on what the project company says. And the way that these DBFOM projects work, the project teams are incentivized to complete the projects as fast as possible. You know, that's how they're incentivized. So they will tell us exactly how long they think it'll take it to be constructed. We're still thinking that 5 years is reasonable. They may actually come back and say that they can do it in 4 years. They may come back and say it's 6 years, but it's really up to them to sequence their construction and figure out exactly how long it's going to take them.
As far as we're concerned, our target's still 2024, though. Right. In the last provincial budget, there was an actual line item for Hamilton's LRT funding, I believe. Is that correct? And do you know what that number was?
So through the chair, in the provincial brief that was put out around the budget, it identified the $1 billion towards capital construction costs of Hamilton LRT. There is no specific line item in their details that says Hamilton LRT. It just gets rolled up into a broader number that Metrolinx has for capital construction costs.
But it was for the full $1 billion as per the original agreement.
Through the chair, that's correct.
The bidders, the 3 consortiums that have this tender now that are putting their bids together, my assumption would be that they're very aware of what the total upset budget is for this project. Is that correct?
Through the chair, they are aware.
Are you aware or able to share with us if there's a mandated contingency in the bid that they're going to put in? Or is the total number, that's the number? I guess what I'm asking is there wiggle room with a contingency?
So through the chair, all estimates that are typically prepared have a level of contingency built into them. So there typically would be that contingency built into the upfront budget cost.
And working through the bid process, is there an opportunity for the bidders who have the tender package, well, they will have had it for 2 years in total by the time their bids are submitted. Is there an opportunity for them to value engineer some of the components of the project, to use their innovation to make sure that their bid is within what they understand to be the total budget?
So through the chair, absolutely. So as part of the design, build, finance, operate, maintain, or the alternate financing procurement process that we're using, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for innovation on the project. We're giving them the general parameters of what we want to see at the end of the day, and it's really up to them to put that all together and create the best design. So they are going to be looking for all opportunities to make construction as easy as possible for them. And by making it as easy as possible, that also takes out risk on schedule delay and ultimately results in cost savings.
And just further to Councillor Ferguson's comments, would you say it would be within their best interest to make sure that they are within what we understand the budget to be now?
Through the chair, it's definitely within their best interest.
The original budget was set back in 2014, I believe, that's correct? When that, that budget was originally worked through, do you have a sense of what level of certainty they would have had when they put those numbers together? And I'm thinking of, they were at the concept and preliminary design phase, whereas now they're working into the detailed design and the actual planning of the construction components. Would the updated budget be more refined now?
So through the chair, as we go through the process, Metrolinx's technical advisors and owner engineers are always looking at the budget to see whether or not it's still in line. The last indication that we received from Metrolinx is that it still seems reasonable and doable.
So since 2014, Metrolinx, as the design and the concept is being refined, they're updating their budgets. And as you get closer to the completed design work, the budget becomes more and more refined. And Metrolinx has been working through that process, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And my last question is just on some of the overall trends in the construction industry. Recently, between now and 2014, I think there's been a fairly significant increase in projects costs. And are you aware of, and is Metrolinx taking that into account, some of the existential issues, such as, I'm thinking specifically about U.S. steel tariffs that nobody saw coming and have had a pretty significant impact on some of our construction pricing?
So through the chair, yes. So anytime you're putting together an evaluation of one of these bids or an estimate of one of these bids, you're trying to forecast, what certain markets are doing, where certain trends are going, and you do provide levels of escalation based on certain material costs to the best of your ability. I mean, you're never really sure exactly what's going to happen at any given time. But if you know that there's a trend happening, you see something that could happen in 5 years from now, you try to blend that into your estimate.
Thank you for that. So that's all the questions I have, and I certainly share the concern around the council table of there being an overrun on the bid, but at the same time, it is a competitive bid process, and I'm confident and certain that the bidders are very aware of what the repercussions would be if they end up being over that limit. So thank you for that, and thank you for the answers, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. My questions this morning are really simply to get to some due diligence. I'm not obstructing the process. I respect the councilors and the mayor, their position on LRT. My position is that I will oppose it and vote against it, but I'm not trying to obstruct the process at all. I just want to make sure that we all have the information that we need as we move forward. Even on the information report, at the appropriate time, you could come to me. I will be voting against receiving the information report, simply because I understand we're now at 60 yes votes on LRT. And that was not 60 votes to approve LRT. That was a whole bunch of information reports that were included in that. So I'm not partaking in that silliness. Can I ask, Madam Deputy Mayor, the $151 million that has been spent from our LRT office, has council seen any of the financial reports on the expenditures?
So through the chair, I don't think that this council has received a detailed accounting from Metrolinx as to where everything was apportioned. Ultimately, that's a Metrolinx account. So it would be with them, but I don't believe that this council has asked for or received a detailed accounting.
I appreciate that. So to be clear, the LRT is a 100% Metrolinx project.
So through the chair, that is correct. All funding associated with the capital construction costs of the project are Metrolinx funded, provincially controlled. So what was presented in the report today, the $151 million spent, the $20 million committed, is 100% provincial money.
I would suggest to my colleagues that it might be prudent to seek an expenditures report from Metrolinx, both on the capital and operating side, including personnel, because I heard very clearly that the province is saying it's $1 billion minus what you spent on the project. And I don't want to get into a situation where we're publicly arguing with the province that this money was spent on communication and not on capital. So I think it would be wise for us to get that information as soon as possible. Madam Deputy Mayor?
So through the chair, you're correct. So the $151 million that has been spent and the $20 million that has been committed is part of the $1 billion capital costs. So it's not above, beyond, it is part of the $1 billion. So there is no argument on that.
Okay. And so, again, the question to my colleagues is, let's get a report, because some of that money, with the greatest due respect to Metrolinx in the province, was spent on public relations and personnel who were out doing some excellent communications work, I might add. They had these little booths going up all over the place. That should not be falling under a capital expenditure. We wouldn't be doing that here at the municipality. So if we're going to be into a possible discussion on escalations and things like that, we want to make sure that we're talking about pure capital dollars. So the 151 million, in my mind, we want to make sure that all of that was capital and it's appropriate to be a part of the $1 billion. Anything that was separate that Metrolinx spent on public relations firms, strategy firms, and all of that information, that should not be a part of that. And I think the only way you can get to that is making that request. And so I would suggest to my colleagues that that would be a prudent thing to do. The request for confirmation on policy and project overruns, I think I heard that we're waiting on Metrolinx. Our request didn't go to Metrolinx. Our request went to the minister. And the mayor signed that letter February 26th. I reached out to the minister's office at the beginning of April asking, we have not received a response. Their response is, gee, we didn't get it. I forwarded it to them April 4th and they still haven't responded. I asked the clerks this morning. So I'm profoundly disappointed that when a letter from our mayor gets sent to the Minister of Transportation, we're now months in and there's been no response to it. That's unacceptable. I understand that the number, it's been stated that the number was in the budget. I read the budget. The number in the budget was in what I would call the preamble, the executive summary of the budget. When you actually go into the budget numbers for the ministry, I couldn't find it. And that didn't surprise me because I understand it's still a design, build, finance, operate, so it shouldn't be in the budget. It was a political statement, a confirmation, which was requested, and they did that, and the mayor properly announced that's the case. The challenge for me is still around the escalation clause. And I think I heard, Madam Deputy Mayor, that I need clarification. I thought I heard you say this morning that the inflationary escalation clause is going to be covered by the province. And I have not heard that anywhere else. Everything I've heard so far is, it's $1 billion, folks, that's it. And yet I heard this morning that an escalation clause, which could, from 2014 to now, I don't know, 50 million, maybe $70 million, is being covered somewhere, and I couldn't find that anywhere. So can you just clarify for us where you got that information?
So through the chair, since the initial inception or reinitiation of the project back in 2015, it has always been communicated to us from Metrolinx that the funding was in 2014 dollars and that there would be escalation associated with those funds.
So is it possible that you could share something in writing in that regard? Because that would be good to know. Because what we're hearing from the province, from the premier, from the minister is it's $1 billion, that's it. Anything over and above that, we have to find it somewhere else. Not we, perhaps the feds involved, as the mayor said. But ideally, I know it's a Metrolinx project, but we need to see this information. Because we're sitting out in the street taking hits from different residents for not getting the answers to these questions. And this is new information for me. I've never heard that. Maybe my other colleagues have heard it all along. I've never read that anywhere. I didn't see it in the MOU. So we need that in writing, not just verbally from the folks at Metrolinx, because they're ultimately not the ones that are making the decision. Can I ask one final question with regards to, it is a Metrolinx project. If they begin demolition work on the street in preparation in advance of any agreement being signed by the city with regards to operation and maintenance and all of that, so this is not a finalized product yet, that's on their dollar. They're not going to come back to the city and say, well, you got to pay for this now because you changed your mind. And it concerns me that we don't have the final numbers. We don't know what the subsidy is going to be to pay for offsets on lower fares because there's not enough riders. We don't know any of that information. They're continuing with the project. A municipality wouldn't do that. A municipality would get all of the answers first and then begin the project. We wouldn't start spending all of the money prior to actually understanding what the cost is going to be on an annual basis to us. So can I just get clarification that that's not going to come back? Do we have anything in writing in that regard?
So through the chair, any work that Metrolinx would undertake at this point in time on their own, outside of the Project Co, are costs that are capital in nature and their responsibility. So if Metrolinx decides that they are going to advance some work in order to improve schedule, to try to create some certainty around the project, to make it easier for the project company to come in and build quicker, then those are in fact capital costs. They're just moving when that work is done and by whom that work is being done by, but they are part of the overall capital budget amount.
Okay, and so when I read the MOU and the final phrase in the MOU is that it's not binding on either party, we're not in a situation where any of this is binding on the municipality as of yet. We still get to make the decision based on the operation and I forget the name of the agreement that's coming to America. Operation and maintenance agreement, thank you, Madam Clerk. That's when we would make our decision in terms of what our contributions will be based on an annualized basis. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly on the the operations and maintenance. So you did a report a while ago that put in a pretty estimates on what the operational costs could be. I think the range was somewhere between 3 and 8, not any higher than that. My understanding is Kitchener-Waterloo, same length, same distance. Going to be up and running in June, is running at about $5 million in terms of annualized operating. So can you kind of refresh us on that issue? Because I keep hearing that we don't know. Well, we have a pretty good idea. It's just a matter of refining that number through the RFP process. So, Chris?
Yeah, so through the chair, we did present an update report to council last year on O&M costs or potential operations and maintenance costs. And you're correct, there was a range in there. So the net, I believe the net, and I don't have the figures in front of me right now, but I believe the net was around $4 million overall for transit increase. And then there was an additional $1 million or so for potential municipal service upgrades as well that would be required, service improvements that would be required. So I believe the numbers were between $5 and $6 million overall, net increase overall. We continuously review those numbers and refine those numbers and try to ensure that we have the most up-to-date information, but that's what the information we have at this time is.
Right. And the only way to get the solid final information is to get the RFP out, done, completed, assessed, and then discussions then ensue, correct?
So through the chair, correct. Any information or discussion around cost overruns, capital costs, operations and maintenance costs will really be resolved once we have the bid information back from all the proponents.
Great, thank you very much. I'll move to receive the presentation.
Thank you, and I don't know if Kitchener is a good example. It's a completely different model, and I don't think I heard it only operating. You were actually talking about operating and maintenance, so the operation of the maintenance barn and employees over and above the operation of the actual service. That was all included. That was inclusive numbers that you just cited?
So through the chair, that would be correct.
So Finch West, 11 kilometers, just awarded their tender. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Are those numbers jiving with your operating maintenance numbers in Kitchener?
So through the chair, I'd be very hesitant to compare the Hamilton situation to Eglinton or Finch, just given the underground nature of some of their stations. You're talking surface runs, some other type of station stops that are different than Hamilton. So I'd be very cautious to compare the two.
So for correction, Madam Chair, you're talking Eglinton now. Finch is a different beast than Eglinton. I agree with you on the Eglinton one, which the operating cost was astronomical. I think it was in the $20 or $30 million. But I agree with you. It's not an apple-to-apple comparison. I don't think Kitchener-Waterloo is an apple-to-apple comparison either. So, it's convenient to suggest that it's an apple-to-apple comparison with Kitchener, but it's not with Eglinton, and I agree with you on the Eglinton one. I'm talking about the Finch West, and my understanding is there's only one subgrade piece to the Finch project that was just awarded. So all the numbers are in.
So through the chair, I'd be hesitant to compare us to anybody. Until we get the bids back, we know specifically what it would cost for Hamilton. That's what we should be looking at. If we are going to compare ourselves to anybody, probably the best comparator would be here, Ontario, which I believe just closed. We'll know those numbers probably this fall once they go through their evaluation process. I would say that that's probably a better comparator. But again, comparing us to other municipalities is difficult. All of these projects are unique in their own way. You can use it as an idea or as a guide, but I wouldn't necessarily rely upon those comparisons.
The kilometers we're looking at in Hamilton is what, 14?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So the Finch line, they're saying it's a $2.5 billion project. The contract cost came in at $1.2 billion. 11 kilometers. So, and I was told through this process that we can learn where you have those comparators on the operating and maintenance costs. And my understanding, and I'm trying to dig it out, but my understanding, the operating maintenance cost on the Finch line is much higher than what's being quoted. So I just want to ensure that we don't put false strawman issues out there in regards to providing hope and then get sticker shock when the actual numbers come in. So I want to truly be cautious about, and I'm not suggesting that the numbers are going to be higher. I'm just saying that when you're creating a narrative that the numbers are lower is equally problematic. What we should be saying is we don't know what those numbers are, and there's a pretty significant range, and we won't experience that number until we actually have our bid in. Would that be a probably prudent approach to this?
So through the chair, I think we've always been cautious when speaking to the operations and maintenance costs of saying that, you know, it's based on estimates. It's based on, you know, hopefully some other comparatives that we think of what this might come in at. But until we get the actual bids, we won't know.
So I was told through the chair that, and I think you sat, no, you, I don't know if you sat on that meeting with the mayor and I in the Metrolinx, but they said I had asked because we chose King Street over Main Street, and King Street was 500 meters longer, what the cost was. At that time, the guesstimate from staff, quote and unquote, was $45 million for 500 meters. So here's the question. Finch came in at 1.2 for 11 kilometers. If you extrapolate the guesstimate in that meeting of 45 for 500 meters, that would suggest that our numbers will probably be around, what, 1.4 billion?
So through the chair, again, that's speculation at this point in time. You know, until we get the bids back, we won't know what those costs are.
Thank you.
Just, I heard you stress the word net a couple of times. How are you defining net?
So when we've spoke about net in the past, we've talked about over and above today. So over and above. So when we talk about the net cost for transit service, we take a look at what we're providing from a transit perspective today along the corridor. And when we speak to net, we'll say that it's above and beyond. So when we say 3 to 4 million net, we're saying that the service for the LRT would be 3 to 4 million more than what we provide today.
And included in that number is the loss of the Beeline revenue to HSR included in that net number?
So through the chair, no. We actually retain all the revenue as part of this project, so there is no revenue sharing on the part of the city and Metrolinx. So any revenue generated by the LRT, which would be the old Beeline, stays with the city.
We're not operating the line.
So through the chair, correct, we're not operating the line, but we are getting the revenue. We are paying for the operations. So essentially, the project company would be the operator of the LRT. They're driving it, they're maintaining it, they're running it, not unlike what our service would be today. However, we retain the revenues to help offset those costs.
Thank you. That's actually very helpful. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the questions that have been asked and the presentation as well. I still believe that, similar to previous speakers, we really need to have Metrolinx present, and we need to have a more fulsome presentation of information. I said so at the beginning of the meeting, and excuse me, especially after hearing the information and the questions and the discussion that's taken place. You know, this is not about being obstructionist. This is about getting prudent information. And, you know, I know, Mr. Mayor, you disagree with that, and you've been, you know, sending some pot shots my way as we've been sitting here. And, you know, I just think this is prudent information that we need. And Madam Chair, similar to Councillor Clark, I feel the same way. At the time it is to receive this report, I will be voting against it. I don't support the LRT. We don't have enough information. And we're forging ahead like a train running out of control at this point. So I just want to make sure I'm recorded as opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. We will take a recorded vote, Councillor. Mayor Eisenberger.
So I am going to move that, that the staff and Metrolinx come back at a future date and do a more fulsome presentation, if that's what's desired. There's no There's no runaway train wreck here. You know, all the information's been out there on a consistent basis, and the questions are all appropriate if they're specific to the project. So the illusion around there being some magical, mysterious, process going on here that we're not aware of is exactly that. It's an illusion. And so I would fully endorse that our staff come back with Metrolinx. Andrew Hope has been the consistent project manager on this. He's still there and going to continue to be. Chris has been doing a terrific job of providing information. The intent here was to provide an update as to where we are. The minister came to town and gave his full support to the LRT project, which is what this council has been asking for. It did not say, we will give you, the city of Hamilton, $1 billion to do whatever you want to do with. That has never been discussed again since the election. And had made a commitment that any overages, they would potentially proceed to look at other options like the federal government and other places that might be able to provide if, and that's a big if. So the original quote for this particular line from Eastgate to McMaster was $850 million, as you recall, originally. When it was announced, they updated it by $150 million to account for the time lag that had happened and built an escalator into the process. And it would be helpful to have that in writing from them. That's what I've been told all the way through. And that's been the issue, previously. It is the issue today. That's an escalator clause built into this process. Let's have that confirmed in writing. I think that would be helpful. And then, if people want more information from Metrolinx, they're available at any time, by the way. You can pick up the phone and call Andrew and call Chris and anyone else in the office and get all the information you need. Beyond that, let's bring it all here to the next possible GIC meeting, maybe in June, and have Andrew Hope here to answer those questions as well.
So is it appropriate now to give direction to staff by motion with regards to, I think the mayor is correct, let's get it in writing on the escalating clause so that we all have exactly what's there. But more importantly, I would also like to see the accounting done. I've been on the other side, and I'm not interested in having a debate a couple months from now or a year from now that, well, you spent $30 million on public relations, and so that doesn't count. I want to know exactly what the capital was on the expenditures and what was perhaps communications, which may fall outside of it, or get clarification from them in the alternative, Mr. Mayor, that they would actually pay for that as agreeing that that was a part of the capital. So I look to the deputy mayor whether or not I'm thinking a motion would be appropriate so that we can actually track it. I'm happy to move that motion so that it comes back here.
Hey, Councillor, do you want to put it on? I have one more speaker, though. If you want me to come back to you, Madam?
Yeah, that's fine.
And then he can prepare.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, we could actually receive the report first, and although it is just to be received, I am asking for an electronic vote because we are expecting oppositions, so that we do have it for the record, and then we could take the motion immediately following. Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, I heard a comment that, the original bid was X. I just want to remind my colleagues, we just went through the arena project in Dundas in regards to the estimations on that procurement project and how it's probably 12 to 14% over the original slated budget. So if you did 12 to 14%, just for sake of saying on this particular project, that would be hundreds of millions of dollars. So I am concerned that we can't lock in and suggest. The questions are reasonable questions being asked. It doesn't mean you're getting in the way of a project, but you're trying to be as best and well informed on this project. So the point I made earlier about us putting these imaginary numbers or best guess, I'll put it best guess, on operating cost is concerning to me because it's creating a narrative that the media runs off with, and the reality is it isn't necessarily an accurate number. There's a number of cases and points. For example, I met with Metrolinx again in the same meeting, And the original forecast on peak hour, peak direction for the transit system currently is 444. They indicated after some questioning, and they confirmed in their projection, it would be around 1,500 peak hour, peak direction by 2031. That's their quote, not mine. And they also indicated that that's their best guess based on places to grow and the numbers, and it's not an accurate number. In that same meeting, I showed them a report that showed that the consultants on these numbers get it wrong over 80% of the time by over 50%. So the reality is that's the conversation that took place. So I'm concerned about putting the wrong narratives out. Let's just stick with what we know, what the facts are. Let's not inflate it. Let's not deflate it. If we don't know the answers to those questions, then let's just continue digging until we get those answers so that we are truly being prudent in our approach to this project and fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, are you prepared to put the motion on the floor? Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Then, Mr. Mayor, on the report before us.
I would just move receipt of the report and a request to have staff come back in June with Metrolinx and others for more fulsome report.
Second by Councillor Ferguson.
Pretty pictures, a lot of pretty pictures.
Okay. And we're going to ask that this be a recorded vote. Councillor Partridge, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like that to be two separate, though, because we are receiving the report, and it sounded like it was going to be rolled together into one motion, and it shouldn't be.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, just for clarification as well, I thought that they were there's a separate request. This is separate from what Councillor Clark is asking for? Okay, then yes, we'll just split it as an A and a B. Yeah.
A and B for which? My motion?
Receive the information report, and then the motion direction to have Metrolinx come back in possibly June with a more fulsome presentation with pretty pictures.
Voted on for the councillors.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, and that'll be a recorded vote. And for the record, I will vote in favor of it, even though I'm not in favor of the LRT, but this is just receiving information. And a recorded vote, Madam.
And I'm sorry.
To receive, yes.
I'm sorry, Madam Deputy Mayor. I heard the mayor move it. I did not hear the seconder. My apologies.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you.
No problem. A part only is to receive the information report before us. Chris, thank you, sir.
So through the chair, just for clarification on the second part, it would only be a presentation, not a report, just for clarification.
Okay. Yes.
We're asking for a more fulsome presentation on this report and what the status of where we are today. So, yes.
Thank you for the clarification, Chris. You did, this report is very fulsome and appreciate it. So, Madam Clerk.
Madam Deputy Mayor, through you, again, my apologies, and my apologies to the mayor as well. We have had previous direction, especially on important matters, not to bring forward a presentation without an attached report for tracking. So if it is just to be a presentation for this particular time, I would just request, because this report is not going to be attached to the presentation, if Chris could use the same report number, put it on the presentation with an A for this particular case only.
Yep.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for catching that. Madam Clerk, Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you. And I'd also like to request that the presentation that comes back includes the routes. And also, you mentioned a couple of changes this morning, and I think that should be included as well. And again, for those who are new around this table, they've not had the privilege of having a more fulsome presentation. So include as much information as you can, please, and I think that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yep. Chris, can you make sure then that the presentation also includes reforecasted costs?
Whatever Metrolinx can bring forward. Madam Clerk.
I'm going to leave it up to committee through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, but this is an awful lot of information to be
letting us hang
included
ourselves.
that is not in a staff report, so it will make it very difficult to provide it to you 5 years down the road when you're all asking for it. So perhaps staff can just include a very short one-page, one-paragraph staff report, at least with the council direction on the front, so that we are able to track it and it's done properly. It's too big of a matter to just, my apologies, thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I asked Chris the question, and he started to write a lot, but I didn't hear an answer.
Through the chair, we'll provide that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farr.
Madam Chair, as we've done in the past for big city moving projects and other issues that are large in scale in this city, what's preventing any councillor in advance of this presentation to send their questions at an appropriate time?
Nothing.
And have them answered as part of that presentation? It's just probably more efficient for all of our purposes. Through you to Chris.
The opportunity is available, Chris. Always available.
Through the chair, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, I thought so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually support the clerk. I think we need a report and a presentation, and I don't think it needs to be a complete regurgitation of this because there's enough conversation that came around this table, plus further questions that should be contained in the report. I.e., I asked an explanation of why the actual range on budget in the procurement document for this particular project cannot be revealed to this council. So I hope that would be covered, and whether we could get copies of the actual procurement document ourselves. And again, I'm talking about the template. I'm not talking about post-consortium filling it out. I just want the actual procurement document that is supposed to be a public document, I thought, from a best practice, but I need explanation. So if you can contain that, that'd be great.
Okay, everyone, we've had some great discussions. I'm going to ask that it's a recorded vote for receiving the information report before us today. All in favor? That carries. Thank you, everyone. And now, Councillor, in subsection B, my apologies, Councillor, that was Mr. Mayor's addition of the presentation to come forward by Metrolinx. All in favor? Sorry, on that, Councillor Danko, my apologies. Go ahead. Sorry, Madam Clerk.
So just following this file for a number of years, I realize I am somewhat newly elected. I feel like I'm fairly up to speed on this file. I've had a number of meetings with Chris and his team and others from Public Works. I've spoke to people actually working on the project, my colleagues. So just from myself, I'm happy with the information that we've received here. Project's moving ahead. I personally don't see the value of having an additional presentation from Metrolinx, especially with the risk of the number of questions that are coming in. And I mean, let's be honest, it's going to turn into, again, a whole debate of the LRT project, and I'm not on for that. So if Metrolinx wants to talk about A-Line, that would be awesome. But at this point, I'm happy with where we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You can reflect that in your vote. So the vote on the second part, Madam Clerk, all in favor? Thank you. And that carries. Thank you, everyone. And Councillor Clark, you have your motion, if you'd like to put that on the floor now.
Yes, Madam Deputy Mayor, I am prepared now. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Brenda Johnson that A, staff be directed to request a complete accounting on all LRT expenditures delineating capital, operating personnel, and communications from Metrolinx. And B, that staff be directed to provide documentation outlining the escalation policy addressing inflationary costs incurred since 2014 budget dollars.
Okay, everyone has that. Madam Clerk, all in favor? Thank you, and that carries unanimously. Okay, we're going to now move on to item 10.2, is the Environmental Remediation and Site Enhancement Erase Redevelopment Grant Application for 555 Sanatorium Road, ERG 18-. Can I finish reading it? It's okay, we'll get to you. ERG 18-05, PED 19101, Ward 8. Councillor Whitehead, what's your correction?
Well, that's my correction. It's not Ward 8.
Okay, sorry.
It's Ward 14.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, so as administrator, that's why I wanted to try and catch it.
Thank you. So staff will have that corrected.
But I certainly support what's before
Okay,
us.
so is there any discussion on item 10.2? Seeing none, it's been moved by Mayor Eisenberger, second by Councillor Whitehead. All in favor? Recorded vote. Sorry, please, because it is a recommendation. They waited patiently. Okay. Thank you, that carries. Thank you, everyone. Item 10.3 is, thank you, transfer of responsibilities for festival and event application intake and seat coordination. PED 19087 HSC 19018. It's been moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Nan. All in favor? Electronic vote, please. Thank you, everyone. Carries. Thank you again, unanimously. Are there any notices of motion before us today? Seeing none. Any general information or other business? Seeing none. I don't think there's anything on the unfinished business list. No, no, whoa, whoa, whoa. We have private and confidential. Can I just start reading? Okay, so may I please have a motion? It's like if we follow the roadmap, it all works out great, okay? May I please have a motion to approve the closed session minutes of April 17th and May 1st as presented? Moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Jackson. And Councillor Jackson, you wish to speak to it? No, not to that, sorry. Okay, all in favor? Okay, and then I have, may I please have a motion to move into closed session respecting item 14.3 pursuant to section, Madam Clerk. I'm sorry, what happened? They left. It's okay. Thank you, everyone. Now, Councillor Jackson on, but I'm going to read it off first, okay? Thank you. Well, I have to read it for the record. May I please have a motion to move into closed session respecting item 14.3 pursuant to section 8.1 subsection C of the city's procedural bylaw 18-270 and section 2392 subsection C of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land for city purposes. Now, I understand, Councillor Jackson, you don't believe we need to go in camera, so I'll come to you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Madam Deputy Mayor, thank you so much and for your leadership today. I just want to say that as the ward councillor, this is another acquisition piece of the puzzle to expand the transportation corridor someday further in the Red Hill Business Park between the Upper Red Hill Valley Parkway to the airport. I'm satisfied, and if there's no other questions from my colleagues, I'm happy to keep it from going in camera and happy to move it in public session. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, then I'll read off. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Deputy, Mayor, no, you would not read off what's enclosed.
Okay.
You would just go and read off what's in public, and I'll take the same mover and seconder for the other direction.
Thank you. Have it. So it's been moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Marula, that the 14.3 acquisition by City of Land for road construction report PED 19098 respecting the acquisition by the City of Land for road construction remain confidential until completion of the real estate transaction. Moved and seconded.
And that this direction that would be provided to staff, the closed session direction, also be approved.
Direction's been provided to staff. Okay? All in favor? Thank you. No, thank you for streamlining this. Appreciate it always. You have to vote. Councillor, you seconded it. Thank you. Here we go. Clear and start again, Madam Clerk? That's okay. Sam, you got to stay. We have to redo it. No, we have to redo it. Okay. Jason? Hey, everyone. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. That's great.